Welcome, Dr. Mutiat Oladejo, again to the Sankofa Pan-African series. Now, let's go to your book, your upcoming book. By the way, congratulations.
Thank you.
So the book is entitled Gender Politics and Governance in Africa, the Known and Unknown. And in it, you describe the everyday realities and encounters of women in Africa. So what exactly are the known and unknown? And how might they also apply to other segments of society, like the youths?
Yes, the book is actually an edited work. So I have several authors who are contributors. In my research sojourn, I focus on women and gender studies and women's history. I realized that scholars that have worked on women's history, especially in Nigeria, like Professor Bolanle Awe, used biography as a tool to unravel the powers and roles women had in the society of the past. In fact, through some of their works, we were able to realize that several works that had been done by male scholars was male-centric. We used to call it that, were male-centric. And then really few references made to women. Then the question comes, does it mean that when women in Africa, even from the pre-colonial era, does it mean that they don't exist in the society? Even though we use patriarchy as a yardstick to understand how women were even in pre-colonial times, such as we cannot remove the fact that the society is very patriarchal from the pre-colonial era. Patriarchal, because colonialism also reinforced patriarchy, although colonialism brought about a kind of, it's mixed in the sense that colonialism actually empowered women in some ways, but it actually reinforced patriarchy in some ways. And in the post-colonial era, several neoliberal reforms and economic policies also affect women and affect family system. So the status of women, even in post-colonial times, in the family structures, in the society, is negatively affected. Even though there are the positive sides of life, but we cannot remove the fact that the negative sides of it are very important and relevant for discussion. And so as a result of this, I just felt that given my experience in some consultancy work, we realized that politics is something that almost looks like a taboo for women in Nigeria, and I think in most of the societies in West Africa. It is, it is a rarity for you as a woman to actually succeed as a politician or to have interest in politics in the first place, because there are several factors that inhibit. So, I mean, these are the no: lack of political mentorship for women, Godfatherism. Though, when we say political mentorship, it's also complex, because you realize that even the few women that have access to public positions in Nigeria, they went through the process of getting mentored by godfathers. So when people talk during election time, some politicians from another party, they keep using it as a form of political campaign that no godfatherism. But I laugh, because I feel that godfatherism is about mentorship. If you don't know someone that is going to tell you, if you walk in that direction, you will not get what you want, then you will not know how to navigate the Nigerian political party space. And so for that, what we now rediscover, especially through the Nigerian Women Trust Fund, is that the required political mentorship for women is not there. And so that's why several women meet stumbling block.
Surely we need to make a distinction between godfatherism and mentorship. To my mind, they're two very different things. Mentorship, for me, is a system where someone who has had some experience in a particular field takes it upon themselves to nurture up and coming. so that they too can get to that position, possibly excel.
Yeah.
Whereas Godfatherism is a situation where a person who is a big man, usually a person who has kind of gathered some kind of power and economic wealth, usually not through proper means, and as a way of sustaining their interests in politics or in whatever field they set themselves up on, now nurture young people to toe their line, so that even when they're not physically in power, they're still controlling things. They're two different things.
Yes, I see that point, but I still believe that the kind of setting.
One stems from self-interest and self-propagation, whilst the other can actually be genuinely, used to positively raise, other people up.
From what I have seen, the reality, that is what we can, contextualize. But the reality in Nigeria is, I look at all the women who have had the advantage of holding political positions in Nigeria. I realize that even the ones that are technocrats, they are still entangled in that Godfatherism system. Even though they may have some respectability as to the way they emerged. They may command some respectability, but you still notice that there is still this caucus they must have belonged.
Yes.
They are still there.
Yes.
And that caucus, if you look at their movements up the ladder, you realize that they have been mentored for some time. We don't know them when they were being mentored.
My problem is using the word mentoring for those kind of practices. It's what they've actually been doing has been aligned, to a godfather or some powerful person. Although mentorship also has its own shortcomings, but honestly, Godfatherism there's nothing positive that can come out of Godfatherism in terms of looking at the societal good. As far as I'm concerned, I'm sorry. So that's why I'm a bit kind of skeptical about using the word Godfatherism to describe that route that some women are forced to take because of the way politics is structured around money, around ethnicity, around self-interest, around religious segregation and all of that. It has not served anybody well. Not the women who have ended up going that way. Some of them have actually had their fingers burnt, and because of the numbers that they lack, when they get into the system, they get sucked into all the corruption and all of that, because they do not have critical enough mass, to be able to make much difference.
Yes. And so that's why I came up with the idea that we already know some things. And for instance, what we know is that women in public positions are also being sexualized. They are seen as some people, some sort of people who had done some shady things with some of their godfathers, and before they could get to those positions. And those are the ways men perceive some of these things, which is also problematic. And of course, the unknown is that looking across African societies, you realize that there are several things we don't see that women do that actually is a form of reinforcing power and speaking truth to power to influence things that affect women. And so those are the political, the things that entangle between politics and governance. And so when I say the unknown, I've worked on several things, and I realized that looking at Ellen John Sirleaf in Liberia, for example, when everything was, when Liberia was in a state of turmoil and there was no way out of the anarchical system they find themselves in, Ellen John Sirleaf looked at directions the men were not looking at in the society, and they started working with women at the grassroots. The women at the grassroots were actually the ones that led the campaign for her to emerge as the president, and that actually sustained her through. Then we look at Joyce Mujuru in Zimbabwe. Much as she was also a kind under the influence of Godfather through her political party, but looking at the history of her involvement in politics, she had been involved in Zimbabwean politics since the 1970s. And so she transformed from being a military woman, a guerrilla girl, to a civilian. And she was part of the political system, not until they realized that she was actually interested in becoming the president, and they started bringing on all sorts of things against her to actually downplay her interest and ambition. Then the third one is Wangari Maathai in Kenya. She also actually lose her marriage because she was interested in activism and all that, speaking truth to power. I think was Arap Moi in Kenya then actually did a lot of things against her. I think at the point she was imprisoned, but she made sure that she used the environment, protecting the environment as a means of activism. So these are several things people tend not to see or understand about the society. So that's what the book is about.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people will find in your work the fact that you actually take time to make these arguments that women have never really been excluded from politics, but that there are certain issues around their involvement.
Yes.
I know that you look at Lagos, which is an urban area, urbanized part of Nigeria, and the way in which certain positions, political positions, have been feminized, in Lagos. Can you throw some more light on it? I know you, one of the illustrations, some of the illustrations you've given about other women in other African countries show how some of them actually fall prey to this Godfatherism. I mean, the Zimbabwean and the Ugandan instance. I mean, these are examples of women who, having risen through the ranks because of influences of some level of Godfatherism, at the end of the day, it turns and bites them in the face.
Yeah.
So you also looked at it in the Nigerian situation, and one of your studies actually looks at Lagos. Can you please throw some more light on the politics in Lagos?
So, issue of Lagos. Nigeria started democracy in 1999. And I think then Lagos
not started, we resumed after a long, we resumed after a long, after a long.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. There is a tendency to always see that 1999 as a new.
No, that was.
I know. And so AD then was Alliance for Democracy was the party in power, and I think it was then Bola Tinubu emerged as the governor of Lagos State. And from what we know or what we can discern, it wasn't as if it was his interest to have a female deputy governor in the first instance, but it was the interest of the party. Some other factions in the party felt that that candidate, the woman that was his deputy there, should emerge. And so that was how, so it was a kind of a party ideology, but not the interest of the governor himself. So that brings us to the question of how complicated it is within the Nigerian constitution. At times we ask ourselves, what exactly are the roles of the deputy governors in Nigeria?
Otedola also had a female deputy, Michael Otedola.
I think it was Okunu.
Had a number of female deputy governors in Lagos.
Yeah. And so this particular case here for that chapter is about the fact that it wasn't the governor himself wasn't interested in a female deputy, but it was the interest of the party, meaning that the party ideology felt that at that point in time that there should be gender inclusion, which is good enough. But we realized that the woman who became Tinubu's deputy then, they had some disagreements, a fallout, and I think she resigned. I think she voluntarily left, even though she must have been pressured, but she voluntarily left, and a male candidate emerged as the deputy governor. But subsequently, looking at the history of that position, I think after Femi Pedro, other candidates in that position have been female. I think about 5 or 6 women have occupied that position. Not until 2019, when the dynamics changed again. And of course, the dynamics changed because maybe we should say that despite the fact that women have occupied this position over the years, there is still this political mentorship for women that is lacking. So the kind of power those women probably command in the caucuses they belong to within the party may not be there presently. So the new women, especially women who are going to be in their middle ages maybe from 30 to 45, that age bracket, they still lack mentorship of what it takes to occupy some of these posts. And so women in that age bracket still have a challenge of getting mentored and getting prepared for these positions. Like I said, political party politics for women is complex because I think in my PhD thesis, Ibadan Market Women and Politics, I realized that the way political parties have been structured since the era of Awolowo is a bit problematic for women. They call it women's wing. And at times I wonder, I don't like that idea, because that idea is a way of removing women from important things within the party. So they call it women's wing. They create a kind of executive in that women's wing. And so only that women's wing only becomes relevant when it's time to campaign for elections. So in fact, there was Nigerian Women Trust Fund organized a workshop last year, and female politicians were invited to come and talk about their experiences as members of political parties. And it was shocking. Their revelations were shocking. They are just there. Just like I discovered in my PhD thesis for the 1950s. Same thing is still repeating itself in contemporary times. They tell you they don't even have a budget as women's wing of the party. They don't understand how the finances should even go about. So all they know is when it is time for election, the men will just give them some amount to campaign. And so these are the kind of things. So at 2019 in Lagos election, women were not nominated for the post of deputy governor. And I don't know, by 2023, if there are women that can continue the struggle and ensure that a female candidate emerges. Of course, there are women who hold the posts of commissioners and all that. So in fact, they are figureheads.
Yeah. So in other words, I think from what I'm taking away from your explanation is that, so it's not as if there are no women in politics in places like Lagos and other urban areas.
They are there.
They are there. But the route for them getting there is one that has not been beneficial to them.
Exactly.
And so the kind of mentorship they need should be one which looks critically at the way in which, power devolves in these political parties,
yes.
And then kind of help women strategize, so that they can, they can first of all challenge the way it's run and maybe insist on, doing things properly so that they stop being go-aheads. Thank you very much for being a part of the Sankofa Pan-African series. If you have not yet subscribed, please do so. And don't forget to like and share our videos with your contacts. See you next time.